welcome. Wherever you are, allow yourself to soften now, to sink gently into stillness. The day has passed, and with it, its noise, its worries, and its demands. You are here now in the company of stories. Tonight, we travel far across time to the quiet, disciplined world of Edo period Japan. It is a place of structure, of silence and ceremony, of duty, deference, and the rhythm of seasons. Imagine narrow roads worn smooth by wooden sandals, thatched roofs beaded with morning dew, the hush of silk sliding across tatami, and the ever-watchful eye of the shogunate, always just beyond the paper walls. But don't worry, this journey asks nothing of you. You do not need to follow a code. You don't need to bow. You don't need to harvest rice or polish armor. You only need to listen, to drift, and to feel time slow. We'll begin, as all days did in Edo, Japan, before the sun. Chapter 1. Before sunrise, beneath a straw roof. It is still dark. Not the heavy black of night, but the slow blue-gray that comes just before first light, when the world seems to hesitate, holding its breath between sleep and waking. You lie beneath a thatched roof, its scent a blend of dry grass and slow decay. The walls around you are packed with earth, their surface cool to the touch and gently textured like the inside of a clay bowl. This is your home. Not much more than one room, a square space lined with woven tatami mats and softened by time. Your back is stiff, not from age but from the futon's simplicity. You sleep on layers of straw, wrapped in a thin cotton blanket that has long since lost its color. It smells faintly of smoke and rice and summer sweat. You rise before the rooster crows, not from an alarm or command, but from the rhythm etched into your bones. The rhythm of survival, of seasons, of obligation. Your wife is already up. She moves with the silence of someone who has done this every day for 20 years. Her hair is bound with a length of indigo-dyed cloth. Her kimono is faded, but clean. She kneels by the hearth, the irori, dug into the floor and lined with soot-darkened stones. She uses a single long stick to prod the embers left from last night's fire, blowing gently until the smallest flicker becomes a thread of flame. The smoke curls upward lazily, toward the square hole in the roof meant for this exact purpose. A pot sits ready, blackened from years of use. In it, water begins to warm for the morning okayu, a rice porridge stretched thin with water to make the bag of grains last longer through the week. There is no conversation, only sound, the low crackle of the fire, the subtle rustle of cloth as she shifts position, and the distant calls of frogs who have not yet quieted. You dress slowly. Your work clothes, coarse hemp, worn thin at the knees, hang beside the door. The sash that binds your waist has frayed at the edges but still holds tight. You tie it twice, out of habit. Not for fashion. There is no vanity here, only necessity. Your wooden sandals, waraji, woven from rice straw, wait beside the threshold. As you slide your feet into them, you feel the chill of the morning ground seep through the soles. Not unpleasant, just part of the morning. Outside, the air is wet. Not with rain, but with the dew that settles when the sky clears in the night. It clings to the wooden beams of the house, to the thatch above, to the leaves of the persimmon tree that leans toward your neighbor's roof. The whole village is quiet, save for the faint creak of a cartwheel somewhere in the distance. You step into the morning like one steps into cold water, without resistance, without question. Your tools are already gathered, a sickle with a chipped edge, a wide wicker basket, and a short-handled hoe. You balance the basket over your shoulder with a practiced motion, fingers wrapping around its rough rim as if it were part of your body. Your wife hands you a small bundle wrapped in cloth. It contains pickled radish, salted plum, and a ball of leftover rice. It is not much, but enough to keep your limbs moving until sunset. She bows her head slightly, a gesture that means everything and nothing. You do not speak. neither of you needs to. The path to the fields is narrow and familiar. Earth packed hard by generations of feet. A low wall of stones marks the boundary between homes and paddies. Beyond it, the landscape opens into carefully divided plots of water and mud, each reflecting the slow brightening of the sky above. As you walk, you pass a Jizo statue, its stone face worn smooth by rain and reverent touch. A child's red bib is tied around its neck. You pause, bow once, and move on. The mist hangs low, as it often does in early summer. It wraps around the ankles and clings to the bamboo groves like a memory. Insects begin to stir, their faint buzzing a reminder of the day to come. You reach your assigned plot, a rectangle of green and brown bordered by shallow irrigation ditches. The water is cold as your feet sink into it. Your toes feel the soft suction of mud. Without ceremony, you begin. One by one, you pull weeds from the rice rows, careful not to disturb the young shoots. Your fingers move with precision, born of repetition. Your knees ache almost immediately, but you ignore it. There is no luxury in comfort, only harvest. The sky begins to brighten, casting a silver sheen over the water. A light breeze stirs the surface. You hear the sound of clopping hooves behind you. Samurai on patrol. Two of them wearing lacquered armor and blank expressions. Their horses' hooves send ripples through the paddies. You bow deeply, your forehead nearly touching the water's edge. They do not return the gesture. They do not look down. When they pass, you exhale slowly. Relief is a quiet thing. You resume weeding, and the morning continues like a river. Steady, unhurried, constant. Around you, other farmers have emerged, each in their own patch of field, each stooped low, each silent. Only the wind and the water speak now, and somewhere beyond the fields a flute plays, soft, reedy, solitary. A child, perhaps, or an old man with no fields left to tend. The day has truly begun. But the sun, you notice, still has not risen. The rain has not yet fallen, but the mud is thick beneath your boots. You pull your trousers tight and step carefully. Cobblestones slick with last night's drizzle glisten under the gray sky. Mist clings to eaves and curls around lampposts. The morning market bustles, though most stalls are draped in oilskin and cotton, hiding wares from the elements. Vendors call out, their voices competing with the drumming of rain on leaves. From somewhere up ahead, a bell chimes softly. The collector must be close. Other villagers hurry along the path. You stay where you are, rooted to the spot by indecision and a sudden, wild idea. Do you run? Run now, while there's still time. A chicken squawks from the butcher's stall. Its feathers are matted with water, but its eyes are sharp. It stares at you, judging. Your hand clenches. Nothing will stop the collector. You know that. Nothing could. You are rooted to the soil like an ancient tree. To move would be to upend centuries of habit and law. Besides, where would you go? Where could you hide? The faces of your neighbors brush past. A mother cradling a babe, a girl with a basket of fish, a man carrying meat on a skewer. They do not slow. No one looks back. None of them have seen what you have seen. The idea to run flares inside you, then dwindles. The rain starts, fine and insistent, tapping against your hat. The cobbles grow slicker underfoot. The sky weeps. Everything weeps. And still you do not move. A fat raindrop lands on your nose. Another on your lip. Their coolness spreads through you. Rain. What difference does rain make? The laws do not bend for rain. The taxes do not lessen for rain. What difference does rain make? When the first drops fell last night, you ran out to the fields, bare arms stretched wide to catch the blessed water. It was not enough. Not enough. Each drop a promise of new growth, of full granaries. Was it enough? You feel suddenly very tired. You want to go home to the hearth, to the shared silence, but you stay. Because the bell chimes again and the rain drums a tattoo on the ground. Because you can still turn back, pretend it never started, pretend you never knew. Because the thought of running, however wild, was also a kind of freedom. Here you are rooted, but here you are also waiting. For what? For a reprieve, for oblivion, for the sweet release of emptiness. The path curves and widens. Soon you will reach the main road, the paved way that leads to the outer walls, to the hills beyond. You are sure the collector walks behind you. His footsteps are lighter than yours, his posture straighter. He does not duck his head under the low eaves or pull his shoulders against the wind. He does not pause to haggle over a bundle of greens or a skein of string. You know his presence like a shadow. You feel him watching. The bells toll again, deeper now, resonant. It's almost time. The road rises now, climbs slowly away from the river and the town. Soon the houses will disappear behind you, replaced by paddy fields and groves of bamboo. The collector will pass those, walk straight and steady to the gate. Before you can hear the drawbridge rumble, he will already be on the far side. You are sure of it. Your own legs are heavier. The slope is long. The sun is hidden, though you can feel its heat on your back. How many steps ahead of you is he? 5, 10, 100? Are the hills tall enough to hide you? Will the trees welcome you? Or will they only remember the axe that sang in the sunlight last fall, the axe that felled the strongest branches and brought them crashing down? The collector will not know your name, not your story. He is the law collector. He is the law sustainer. Is there a difference? You keep walking. Now the trees crowd close, their roots creeping closer to the surface, eager for purchase, eager for strength. Sunlight bleeds through the canopy, fractured, green-stained. The path narrows, becomes overgrown. Thorns snag at your sleeves. Mosquitoes hum in the heat. Damp earth presses against your calves. The air is thick and sweet, smelling of decay and bloom. Is the forest alive? Is it awake? Does it remember when the world was young and the trees walked with gods? The forest doesn't care about your pain. The forest cares only about itself. You stumble. Reacting, you catch yourself before you fall. Your knee aches. Is the collector watching? Is he as tired as you? Did he, too, wake before the crowing of roosters? Did he watch his children sleep and wish he could shield them from this day? Can he hear the blood singing in your ears? See the damp sheen on your forehead? Can he see it all? Can he feel the prick of mosquitoes or the scratch of thorns? Can he taste the sweat on your tongue? You are different, yet you are the same. One among many. All among one. You continue walking. The collector is close behind you now, so close you can feel the heat of his body, the pulse of his arm. The air thins, the trees thin. You emerge from the forest to find the hills spread before you, the collector beside you. The road curves once more and you walk on. You do not know what lies ahead. Perhaps a guard tower, perhaps a patrol. Perhaps the collector walks not ahead of you, but beside you, sharing your burden. Perhaps there are no taxes anymore, and this is only a pilgrimage. Perhaps there are no more prayers for a good harvest, because the prayers have been answered. Perhaps there is no longer a need for empty bellies, because the granaries are full. You do not need to know. You cannot know. You walk on. The road stretches endlessly before you, and the hills hold only the wind. The sky weeps still, and the clouds are gathering, pregnant with rain and storm. There is nothing ahead but the journey. There is nothing behind you but the memory of home. You walk on, and the road goes where it will. Chapter 4. A sword drawn in silence. The palace was built for quiet, not peace, but control. Its halls were long and shadowed, wrapped in lacquered wood and woven reed mats. Every corner curved like thought, every doorway concealed by layered paper screens. Even in daylight, the palace held to its hush like a monk to prayer. Here, no one spoke unless spoken to. The sliding of sandals on polished floors was a language. The rustling of sleeves, a kind of punctuation. Words were too heavy to use freely. Each one was a brushstroke in a painting watched by many eyes. It is in one such hall, near the garden edge, that Lord Asano walks. He is a daimyo, a provincial lord summoned to the shogun's court. His steps are deliberate, neither rushed nor hesitant. His robes are silk, patterned subtly with cranes and pine, the symbols of endurance and vigilance. His two swords, the katana and the shorter wakizashi, rest at his left hip, untouched, ornamental, as required. He has been summoned here not for judgment or war, but for etiquette, for ceremony, the most delicate and dangerous game of all. Asano is young by court standards, too principled for some, too direct for others. But he is not a fool. He knows this place, its traps, its silence, its glances like knives behind folding fans. Today, he is to receive instruction from Kira Yoshinaka, a senior official tasked with guiding daimyo through the labyrinth of court rituals. Kira is powerful, and he knows it. His words are laced with superiority, his manner sharpened by entitlement. Many lords fear him, many hate him, most obey him. Asano bows, deeply, as required. Kira does not return it. Instead, he scoffs, quietly but audibly, a single sound that punctures the stillness of the room like a splinter. "You bow like a farmer," Kira says. The words are gentle in volume, cruel in content. Asano straightens, slowly. His hands remain at his sides, his jaw does not move. But something inside him, something old and heavy, shifts. Kira steps closer. He continues to speak, his tone sliding between insult and instruction, mocking and magnanimous. He references gifts not given, bribes not offered. He talks of proper manners, in a way that makes the word provincial feel like dirt on the floor. Others in the room, attendants, guards, scribes, do not meet Asano's gaze. They know this dance. They know how Kira enjoys pressing his advantage, especially with those who still believe in fairness. Asano's breath is slow. His eyes stay level. But his right hand moves. Not forward, not toward the sword. Not yet, but close. Kira, emboldened, turns his back. He gestures toward a scroll on the wall, a poem about autumn wind and withering leaves. He calls it elegant. He says Asano wouldn't understand. And that is when the silence shifts. Not broken, not shattered, but transformed. Asano moves like a drawn bow. His hand finds the wakizashi, the shorter blade, more suited for indoor use, more sudden in its revelation. The sword leaves its sheath without sound. The flash of steel is swift, silvery in the muted light. Gasps come too late. Kira turns. Too late. The blade cuts, not to kill, but to wound. A crimson line blooms across the sleeve of Kira's robe, not deep, but undeniable. Then, stillness again. Absolute. Kira stumbles backward. A guard steps forward, uncertain. Asano releases the blade and lowers his head. The sword clinks gently as it touches the floor. It is done. No battle cry. No chaos. Only the aftermath. Blood beads on polished floorboards. A few drops, nothing more. But in the palace, even a whisper can echo like thunder. The blood was not much, but in Edo's highest halls it was more than enough. Kira stood frozen for only a breath. But that breath, like so many in the palace, held the weight of legacy. He clutched his arm and shouted for the guards. Not in pain, but in outrage. Humiliation, not injury, was the wound that cut deepest here. The officials moved quickly but not hastily. Even in crisis, the court remained quiet. A shoji screen slid open without a sound. Two guards entered and positioned themselves at either side of Lord Asano. Their hands never touched him. They didn't need to. He had already bowed, already surrendered. There was no point in protest. Not here, not now. By the next morning, the sentence had been passed. No trial, no appeal. Just a decree from the shogunate, written in black ink and sealed in vermilion. Seppuku, ritual suicide. For drawing his sword within the palace walls. For violating the sanctity of the shogun's space. For daring to disrupt the perfect silence with steel. It did not matter that Kira had provoked him. It did not matter that the wound was minor. What mattered was order and its preservation. Asano's household was dismantled overnight. His lands seized. His samurai dismissed. The banner of his family was taken down before the ink of his sentence had dried. He was moved quietly to a villa outside Edo. No shackles, no prison, just waiting. His men, those still loyal to him, watched helplessly from a distance, bound by oath, silenced by custom. They were now Ronin, masterless, dishonored, cast out. The name Asano could no longer be spoken in the streets. It passed between lips like breath in winter, visible for a moment, then gone. On the morning of his seppuku, the garden was unusually still. The plum blossoms had not yet opened. The ground was dry, the pond hushed, as if even the koi understood what was to come. Asano prepared in silence. His robes were white, tied neatly. A low table held the dagger, short, ceremonial, perfectly clean. 2 witnesses sat nearby, faces lowered, backs straight. One was the kaishakunin, the appointed second, tasked with ending the pain swiftly after the ritual cut began. But before anything else, a poem. It was tradition, a final offering of thought, composed not for fame, but for closure. Asano picked up the ink brush. The paper waited before him like a grave. His hand moved slowly. The characters were simple, sparse, measured. Though I fall by my own hand, the wind still carries pine needles to the place I once stood. He signed it, folded the page, and placed it beside the dagger. What followed was as precise as it was terrible. No screams, no rushing, no chaos, only the ceremony, only the silence. A blade drawn, a motion begun, and ended by the swift mercy of the second sword. By nightfall, the body had been cremated. The ashes returned to his family in a plain wooden box. The name Asano was no longer spoken in court, but beyond the palace, in quiet houses, in rural inns, and in the hearts of 47 men now wandering without banners, his memory endured. The act was done. But the story was just beginning. For while the world moved on, pretending all was resolved, a deeper silence had settled, a patient one, the kind that waits for snow to fall, for shadows to grow long, for justice to take the shape of steel. But that would come later. For now, the corridors of the palace returned to their calm. The polished floors were wiped clean. The paper doors closed. And once again, all was quiet. But in that quiet, something had changed. Something deeper than disobedience. A promise. Chapter 5. Waiting under falling snow. The snow returned quietly that winter, early and heavier than expected. It fell over Edo like a sigh, covering rooftops, stone lanterns, and footpaths in soft layers of stillness. And as the flakes accumulated, so too did the silence. Among the people, the name Asano had nearly vanished. It was no longer written, no longer uttered aloud, at least not in public. The court had moved on. The shogun had not addressed the matter again. And Kira Yoshinaka, though bruised in pride, remained untouched in station. He received no punishment. He returned to his duties as if nothing had happened. But beyond the palace gates, beyond the scrolls and the silk and the decorum, something had shifted. The 47 men who had once served Asano, his retainers, guards, advisors, and friends, had scattered. Dismissed from duty, they were no longer bound by the privileges of samurai. Their armor was stored away. Their homes had been seized, their stipends cut. They were now Ronin, lordless, aimless, men without titles, shadows cast by a broken name, And yet, they did not vanish. They simply waited, not together, not in one place. That would have been foolish, dangerous, too obvious. Instead, they disappeared into ordinary lives. One took up carpentry, chiseling beams with hands once trained to hold a sword. Another opened a tea house near the Sumida River, serving weary travelers with quiet precision. One married a merchant's daughter and took on her family's trade, bowing low to customers who never guessed his past. Some wandered, unshaven and unspoken, begging for coin or work, sleeping beneath temple eaves. And one, Oishi Kuranosuke, the senior retainer, moved farthest from the man he once was. He shaved his head. He drank openly. He stumbled through alleyways and brothels, laughing too loudly, weeping too freely. He became a man of excess, wasteful, thoughtless, broken. Or so it seemed. The transformation was complete, and it was convincing, because it had to be. All the while, his eyes never stopped watching. The others too remained vigilant, quietly, patiently. They studied Kira's routine, his habits, his guards, his gates, his walls. They took mental note of his servants' names, his visitors, his preferences for incense and music. They tracked his schedule by moon and meal. And still, the snow fell, year after year. Kira, confident in the court's protection, took no further precautions. He believed the matter settled. What samurai would wait 2 winters for revenge? What ronin could coordinate across cities, across disguises, across hunger and humiliation? He had forgotten that silence can be loud, that stillness can be a kind of preparation. He had not remembered that the 47 were bound not just by duty, but by memory. And memory, in Japan, is not something you leave behind. As the second winter deepened, rumors began to stir in the alleys and bathhouses. Nothing direct, just murmurs. Whispers of former samurai working as porters, of a drunk in Kyoto whose gaze was too sharp for his speech, of a woodcutter whose movements betrayed a soldier's balance. But even the whisperers spoke quietly. There was respect in the fear. Snow continued to fall, layering over temples and rooftops, softening the world. But beneath it, the 47 prepared. Quietly, precisely. They sharpened blades that had not seen light in years. They passed messages in poems and grain sacks. They carved maps from memory, etched into wood and smoke. Each one knew what waited at the end of the plan. Death. The law was clear. Revenge was not sanctioned. Once Kira fell, so too would they. And still they waited. They did not speak of it aloud. They did not meet in groups. They did not swear oaths. They simply prepared, each in their own time, each with their own grief folded silently beneath the layers of daily life. They had become snow. Not loud, not fast, but inevitable. It was the second winter since Lord Asano's death, and Edo lay blanketed in white. The city had settled into its seasonal rhythm. Markets thinning, shutters drawn, the river moving slow beneath its frozen crust. The snow, now familiar, muffled sound and softened even the edges of sorrow. In the quiet, the final preparations were made. The 47 Ronin had received their signal, silent, wordless, understood. They traveled under false names, in borrowed garments. Some walked alone for days, passing through mountain passes and ferry crossings like wandering monks. Others arrived under cover of trade, hiding swords in cart bottoms, tying armor beneath layers of straw. They converged not in the city, but outside it, in abandoned shrines and shuttered inns. There, at last, they stood as one again. Oishi Kuranosuke looked different from the man they had followed 2 winters ago. His hair was grown, now tied back in warrior's fashion. His eyes, once blurred with sake, were sharp and steady. The men bowed to him not with ceremony, but with relief. The mask had finally lifted. No speeches were given, no chants, no prayers, just the tightening of armor, the wrapping of fingers in cloth, the testing of blades, They wore white beneath their black, the color of death, a sign that this would be their end, even if they succeeded. That night, as the moon rose and the snow continued its fall, they moved. They split into two groups, one to attack the front gate, the other the rear. Kira's residence was well guarded, with high walls and watchmen on every corner. But the guards were not prepared for resolve like this. Not after 2 years, not in this kind of cold. They struck with precision. Doors were not kicked. They were slid open and breached with methodical force. Torches were lit not to burn, but to guide. Voices were hushed, every footstep placed with care. They knew where Kira would be. They had studied every room, every sliding screen, every alcove where a man might try to disappear. Some guards resisted. They were subdued without cruelty but without hesitation. Swords flashed, then fell still. Those who surrendered were tied, not slain. The Ronin moved like snow in a storm, covering every corner at once. In the inner chamber they found a man hiding, pale, trembling, wrapped in sleeping robes, crouched behind a stack of lacquered boxes. He did not speak. He only stared, eyes wide, breath shallow. It was Kira. At first, they questioned it. The room was plain. The man before them unarmed, unmarked, but the features matched. The hair, the brow, the scar near his jaw. They asked his name. He did not answer. They asked again. Still, silence. But silence had never saved him before. Kira Yoshinaka was offered the chance to die with honor, to commit seppuku, as Lord Asano had done. A dagger was placed before him. He refused. Or perhaps he could not move. And so the final blow was struck. Swift, ritual, clean. They took his head, not for cruelty but for proof. It was wrapped respectfully in cloth and carried with care. By dawn, the Ronin marched through the snowy streets of Edo, not in triumph, but in solemnity. They moved quietly, together, through a city that did not yet know what had happened. They walked to Sengakuji Temple, where Asano's grave stood. There they bowed. There they placed Kira's head before the stone. They had completed their duty, and they knew what must come next. The shogunate, though impressed by their loyalty, could not pardon them. Law demanded consequence. But they were not executed as criminals. They were permitted to die as samurai. One by one, in the temple they had chosen, they took the blade. And in silence, like their lord, they followed him into legend. Today, at Sengakuji, their graves still stand. 47 stones in a quiet courtyard. Visitors leave incense and coins. Some bow, some pray. Most simply stand, watching the snow fall on the worn names. The men who waited under falling snow are long gone. But the silence they carried, the discipline, the grief, the memory, still lingers like cold air beneath an old roof. A silence that does not vanish, only settles. Chapter 6. The 47. Strike. The snow had not stopped. It drifted in heavy silence over rooftops, piled along stone walls, and softened the alleys of Edo like cotton laid gently over the city's bones. By now, it had been falling for hours. Quiet, constant, cold. The kind of snow that dulls footsteps and swallows sound. In the early hours of the morning, while the city still slept and shutters remained closed, 47 men moved through the darkness. They wore black. Not uniforms, but matching robes over white underclothes, colors chosen with purpose. White for purity and death, black for resolve. Their heads were wrapped in cloth, their armor light but sufficient. Beneath their robes, each man carried 2 swords. They had walked for hours, some beginning the night before, navigating frozen streets and narrow side paths. Their movements were timed with care, calculated to converge on one place, the Edo mansion of Kira Yoshinaka. Though more than a year had passed since Lord Asano's death, the plan had never left them. It had only grown more detailed, more refined, more certain. This night had been chosen for its snow, for its quiet, and for the complacency of their target. Kira's estate sat large and proud within the city, with tall white walls and a front gate reinforced by iron and heavy timber. Watchmen patrolled the courtyard. Servants were still awake, tending to braziers, checking shutters against the cold, unaware that each movement they made was already being observed. The Ronin divided into 2 groups, 23 to approach the front, 24 to take the rear. They carried ropes, hammers, and climbing hooks tucked into baskets alongside swords. They carried no firearms, only steel, only silence. The front group took position outside the main gate. The signal was given, a drumbeat, single and low. Not warlike, just loud enough to draw attention. One of the Ronin beat the drum slowly, rhythmically, like a temple bell calling for meditation. Inside the gate, guards turned toward the sound, confused. That was the moment the Ronin acted. They broke the front door with a battering beam, a single thrust, coordinated and precise. The hinges gave way. The gate fell inward, scattering snow and splinters. At the same moment, the rear team scaled the back walls. Rope ladders were thrown. 3 men climbed silently and secured a foothold, then dropped down into the courtyard beyond, opening the gate from within. The estate was surrounded. No one escaped. Within seconds, guards scrambled to arm themselves. Shouts echoed through the compound, waking servants, scattering lanterns. But the Ronin had rehearsed for this. Every man had a role. Every turn of the hallway, every threshold, every hidden door, memorized. They did not rush. They advanced with balance, every step anchored, blades drawn not for display but for duty. In the central building, Kira's personal guard made a stand. A brief, frantic resistance. Swords clashed, short blades against long, trained arms against desperate ones. The Ronin overwhelmed them quickly, not with numbers alone, but with stillness, with unity. Each movement deliberate, each strike clean. They avoided killing where they could. Those who surrendered were bound. Servants were pushed aside, not cut down. One Ronin shielded a child with his own back as a skirmish broke out in the hallway. They were not there for destruction. They were there for justice. And it lay hidden somewhere behind the inner screens, Kira's chambers, shielded by silence and fear. They moved deeper. The snow still fell. The wind outside moaned softly as the snow pressed against the wooden beams of Kira Yoshinaka's estate. But inside, the world was measured in footsteps. The Ronin moved through the corridors as if they had always belonged there. Their sandals padded softly over tatami mats now dusted with stray flakes of snow blown in through broken doors. Paper screens had been slid open or torn away. Lanterns, relit after battle, glowed low and steady, casting long shadows that danced like memories. The central house was vast, but not confusing. They had studied its design, recreated it in secret from memory and rumor, laid it out with pebbles and reeds in distant shrines. Now, those mental blueprints came alive. They passed through dressing rooms, storerooms, galleries of calligraphy and incense jars. Kira's wealth was evident, but not overwhelming. The house had a cold, formal elegance. Nothing personal, nothing soft. It smelled faintly of camphor wood and ash. Room by room, they searched. Every man moved with discipline. Some held drawn blades, others carried lanterns or shouted commands to confused servants. Occasionally, they paused to question a witness. Where is Kira Yoshinaka? No one seemed to know, or no one dared say. Then they reached the inner chamber. A high-ranking servant, trembling, gestured toward a narrow hallway. He might be in the rear guest room, behind the storehouse, he whispered. The Ronin did not threaten him. They bowed quietly and continued. Through a narrow sliding door, they entered a small chamber, bare, save for a brazier glowing softly in the corner. Mats were stacked neatly. A single quilt was drawn up around the figure of a man lying motionless. At first glance, he appeared to be asleep, but when they approached, the man stirred. Kira Yoshinaka. His hair, though disheveled, matched the description. His build, his facial scar, everything aligned. Yet he did not rise. He remained beneath the quilt, wide-eyed, silent, unmoving. The Ronin stepped back, giving him space. Oishi Kuranosuke came forward. He was calm, as always. In his hand, he held a short dagger, its blade polished, its handle wrapped in white silk. He knelt before Kira and placed the dagger on the mat. "You are a samurai," he said softly. "You know what this is." Kira did not reply. His lips trembled. His hands remained under the quilt. The silence stretched thin. Oishi waited. Minutes passed. No answer came. Then, one small motion. Kira turned his head away. Whether in refusal, fear, or shame, it was clear he would not take the blade. And so the decision fell to the Ronin. Oishi gave a signal. The execution was immediate. One clean stroke from the Kaishakunin, honoring the ritual even when the ritual had been declined. No cruelty, no excess, just the end of a man who had insulted, provoked, and destroyed the honor of their lord. The room fell still again. No celebration followed. No words. The Ronin carefully wrapped Kira's head in white cloth, binding it tightly. Not as a trophy, but as proof. Not of violence, but of justice. Outside, the snow continued. They extinguished the remaining lanterns, checked for wounded, and regrouped silently in the courtyard. There was no need for further delay. Through the snowy streets of Edo, the Ronin walked in quiet procession. The city was just beginning to stir. Bakers lighting morning fires, merchants sweeping shop fronts. A few people saw the procession pass, and though they did not yet understand, they knew something important had happened. The Ronin walked all the way to Sengakuji Temple. There, in the early morning light, they unwrapped the white cloth and placed Kira's head before Asano Naganori's grave. They lit incense. They bowed, and they wept. Not loudly, but as men who had carried silence for too long. They knew what would come next. They had taken revenge. But in doing so, they had broken the law. The shogun's court would not ignore this. And still, they did not run. They did not hide. They waited, just as they had waited for the snow. Weeks later, the judgment came. They would be allowed to die by seppuku. Their honor restored, their punishment inevitable. One by one, they followed their leader's path. And now, all 47 rest in the same quiet courtyard beside the man they had served beyond death. Today, if you visit Sengakuji, you may see them. The gravestones are worn by time, but neat and cared for. Visitors still bring incense. Children bow. Even the wind slows as it passes. Because sometimes, silence is louder than steel. Chapter 7. Candles in Yoshiwara. The snow melted eventually. As it always did, spring crept back into Edo, softening the ground and sending thin green shoots through cracks in the stone. Rivers swelled with meltwater, and plum blossoms returned to bare branches. The city resumed its rhythm. Markets reopened. Bamboo blinds were lowered against the afternoon sun. But in one corner of the city, night never ended. Welcome to Yoshiwara, the pleasure district. Enclosed by high walls and guarded gates, Yoshiwara was unlike the rest of Edo. It was a world apart, a world of artifice, perfume, and silence carefully maintained. The streets were narrow and winding, deliberately confusing to those who didn't belong. Even the air felt different, sweet with incense and the faint smoke of lamp oil. Here, it was always evening. Lanterns glowed, even in midday. The sun, though it reached over the walls, never truly lit the heart of Yoshiwara. The gates opened at dawn and closed at dusk, and once inside, you moved to a different rhythm. Time passed not in hours, but in tea served, glances exchanged, songs played on the shamisen. You walk slowly through the curved paths, your wooden sandals quiet against the stone. The snow has not reached here. Not truly. What little remains clings to shaded corners. The courtyards are swept clean. Paper lanterns hang in lines, their red paint vivid against the gray sky. Some bear the names of tea houses. Others are marked with crests, symbols of favored courtesans, famous actors, or wealthy patrons. A gentle music reaches your ears, plucked strings and hollow drum beats, soft and low, more suggestion than song. It comes from behind a screen where silhouettes move carefully, performing a dance unseen. Here, pleasure is not loud. It is curated, controlled, and it begins not with a touch, but with a look. A geisha passes by, robes layered in silks the color of falling leaves. Her hair is high, adorned with delicate pins. Her face is powdered white, with lips painted in careful red. She glances your way, not directly, but just enough to acknowledge presence. Not invitation, not dismissal. Simply awareness. She vanishes through a doorway before your mind can place her expression. In Yoshiwara, everything is wrapped in layers. The fans, the faces, the meanings. Even names are masks. A courtesan may be known to you for years and still remain a stranger. You pass a row of ageia, entertainment houses. Sliding screens conceal the interiors, but their paper glows with candlelight. Shadows play across the walls, arms folding, heads bowing, the curve of a hand lifting a teacup. Laughter drifts from one of the upper rooms, not harsh, but practiced, measured, melodic, repeated with precision. As if it had been rehearsed. Perhaps it had. Farther ahead, a small bridge crosses an artificial stream. Beneath it, koi glide lazily, their fins trailing like silk. The stream is man-made, fed by a redirected canal, but it reflects the lanterns above it perfectly, as if it, too, were playing a role. A boy in a blue coat sweeps the stones, eyes down, shoulders hunched. He glances up as you pass and nods. You return the gesture. Respect here is subtle. Every movement is a performance. You pause before a tea house where the sliding screen is partially open. A pair of sandals rests neatly outside, small, lacquered, red-tied. Inside, voices speak in quiet rhythm, punctuated by the soft tapping of a folding fan against a sleeve. A geisha pours tea. She moves without looking. The cup is filled, lifted, handed, all without a single drop spilled or wasted. Her expression does not change. She speaks, perhaps, but so softly that the sound never reaches the door. This is not a house of indulgence. This is theater, and you are the audience, even if you never take a seat. You step through the threshold. The tea house interior is warm, though not heated. The warmth comes from light. Candlelight, lantern glow, the radiance of reflected gold leaf on sliding doors. The walls are made of lacquered cedar. Screens are painted with cranes, mist, and rising mountains. Every corner is carefully arranged, but nothing is loud. In Yoshiwara, the quiet is deliberate. You are shown to a small tatami-lined room, where the air carries the scent of plum and sandalwood. Incense burns slowly in a corner, its smoke curling like thought. A lacquer tray is placed before you with a single porcelain cup. Thin, steaming tea. You bow slightly. No one speaks. Soon, a woman enters, not rushed, not delayed. Her movements are smooth, more like silk than flesh. She wears layers of robes, each patterned differently, one with rippling water, another with maple leaves. Her obi is tied in a knot that only a professional could manage. Her face is calm. She does not smile, not exactly, but she is not unkind. She kneels with perfect posture. Her hands fold atop one another, her head bows once precisely. You do not ask her name. Not yet. Names are slow to arrive here, like trust. Instead, you observe. That's what Yoshiwara demands. Not desire, but attention. She pours the tea. Her wrists flick slightly at the end, as if closing a sentence. She places the cup in front of you and waits, not for your reaction, but for your readiness. You take it. Sip. It is bitter, slightly floral. The warmth is not just in your mouth now. It's in your fingers, your shoulders, your breath. She speaks at last, not loudly. I heard the river is rising. A simple statement. Weather, perhaps, or metaphor. You nod. Outside, somewhere, a shamisen plays. 3 strings plucked in a minor key. The sound comes and goes, like wind through reeds. It doesn't demand to be listened to. It merely exists. Here, in the floating world, time bends. The woman, whose name you still do not know, tells a story. About a poet who once lost a sandal during a storm. About a cat who refused to cross a bridge until nightfall. About a teacup passed down through 5 generations, each crack a testament to patience. She speaks softly, with the rhythm of someone reciting a song they do not wish to end. None of these stories are meant to be understood all at once. That is the essence of Yoshiwara. Even love here is not real. It is a carefully crafted performance. A geisha's glance, a courtesan's sigh, a poet's unfinished line. Emotion is suggested, not declared. And the illusion is not meant to deceive. It is meant to soothe. Outside, the district is alive with low motion. Footsteps cross narrow wooden bridges. Attendants in navy blue coats sweep falling petals from stone paths. Courtesans in full dress walk in procession, slow, upright, each step a public ceremony. Their attendants carry lanterns to mark their presence. They are not rushing to meet men. They are reinforcing legend. Back inside, the tea is finished. The woman bows once again. She may not return, or she may return wearing different robes and using a different name. You will not ask. Because in Yoshiwara, to ask is to break the spell. You rise gently and step outside again. The candlelight follows you. The streets remain glowing, muffled by the hush of dusk. You pass a small pond where a paper lantern floats on the surface. Its reflection flickers, then steadies. As you approach the outer gate, a guard nods. Not to check your name, no one uses their real name here, but to acknowledge your time in the world behind the wall. Once you leave, Yoshiwara does not follow. It stays behind, contained, unchanging. But it stays in you, like perfume on cloth, like a verse half remembered, like candlelight flickering just behind your eyes. Chapter 8. Stories Behind the Screens. Even within Yoshiwara, there are layers. The outer streets are lined with tea houses and shops, bright, curated, alive with performance. But deeper inside, past the bridges and hidden alleys, you reach a quieter world. A world of rehearsals, not shows, of preparation, not spectacle, of stories, behind the screens. The theater district is one such place, an inner pocket of Yoshiwara where kabuki actors, stagehands, and musicians spend their evenings in whispered work. You wouldn't notice it immediately. The buildings don't stand out. They don't need to. Their paper lanterns are dimmer, their doors slightly ajar. You hear voices before you see them. Not loud, not dramatic. Just murmured lines of dialogue, rising and falling like waves in a shallow bay. Words spoken, repeated, corrected, then spoken again. Inside one such house, a narrow rehearsal room glows with amber light. A single actor stands before a low mirror, his back to the door, his posture rigid. In one hand he holds a white cloth, soft and trembling slightly. In the other, a thin brush dipped in ink. He begins to paint his face, slowly, deliberately. Kabuki makeup is not decoration. It's transformation, a ritual more than a routine. He starts with the base. White rice powder, carefully pressed into the skin until the face is no longer flesh, but canvas. Then comes the black. Fine lines to define the eyes, the brows, the mouth. These are the features of a role, not a man. And finally, the red. bold slashes that signify passion, strength, or rage. Tonight, he plays a warrior who must die with honor. Tomorrow, perhaps a servant who must lose everything for love. The actor blinks slowly at his reflection. For a moment, he looks like he's somewhere else, inside the scene already. Not yet performing, but no longer himself. Behind him, a stagehand tightens the cords of his costume, pulling the layers into place. They do not speak. They've done this 100 times. A practiced dance of cloth and cord and silence. In a nearby room, you hear the creak of strings. A shamisen player tunes his instrument with eyes half closed. His fingers test notes like footsteps in fog. He hums under his breath, a melody older than the walls themselves. One that doesn't need an audience to be beautiful. Above, on the second floor, a courtesan waits behind a silk screen. She is not scheduled for the stage tonight. She is not expected at any house. Instead, she sits alone, wrapped in dark blue robes, her face unpainted. Her hair, usually arranged with pins and combs, falls freely down her back. She holds a brush and writes quietly on a small strip of washi paper. A poem. The strokes are slow, uncertain, not meant for performance, not even for memory, just for the moment. Wind through reed blinds fades the lantern light. I do not wait for you. She places the poem in a box of others, dozens of slips, folded neatly, hidden away. She writes them often, though never reads them twice. Outside her window, someone walks past, footsteps on gravel. The sound echoes, then disappears. Below, laughter rises again from a group of actors finishing rehearsal. Not joyful laughter, but exhausted, worn at the edges, still real. They drink tea from small cups, seated in a circle. No performance now, no roles, just people. Talking softly about weather, about fabrics, about how the lights flickered earlier. One mentions a dream he had last night, about standing on stage with no lines to speak. They nod, they understand. It's easy to forget that even performance has a weight, that behind every painted face there is breath, behind every costume, skin, and behind every screen someone waiting to become someone else. The night deepens, but Yoshiwara does not sleep. It simply turns the page. Down one corridor, past a curtain of indigo-dyed cloth, a scribe sits cross-legged, brush in hand. He is copying out dialogue from a new kabuki script, translating spoken lines into neat, ordered kanji on rice paper scrolls. His brush glides steadily, but he pauses often, not to rest, but to breathe the words, to feel them before writing them. He mouths the lines as he goes, silent echoes of a scene no one else has seen. Sometimes he frowns, gently adjusts a stroke. Sometimes he tilts his head, imagining how the line might sound in the mouth of an actor. A word can change a scene. A pause can shift a story's heart. A bell chimes softly from the rear of the building. A signal, not for prayer, but for quiet. A client has arrived. Somewhere down the hall, a courtesan prepares. She stands behind a folding screen, lit only by the flicker of a small candle. Her shadow moves slowly across the paper, layering silk, tying sashes, adjusting the comb in her hair. It is not hurried, it is not nervous. It is practiced, composed, performed even for herself. The room is sparse. A tray of tea waits, untouched. A small calligraphy scroll hangs on the wall, bearing a single character. May, meaning pause or the space between things. That space is everything in Yoshiwara. Between the tea poured and the sip taken. Between the bow and the response. Between two people who may never truly know each other, yet pretend for one evening that they do. She finishes dressing and steps softly into the room. Her client sits already, middle-aged, shoulders square, eyes tired. He bows too deeply. She bows less. Balance must be preserved. They speak, but not of love, not even of pleasure. Instead, he asks about a poem she once recited. She smiles slightly. recites it again. Her voice is low and smooth, as if tracing the edge of a cup. Under lantern light, the moth circles 3 times more, though the flame has dimmed. He nods, says nothing. Outside, the footsteps of actors leaving the theater echo down the street. The performance has ended, but the stories linger. They always do. In another room, a makeup artist carefully washes red pigment from a performer's face. The water runs pink into a shallow bowl. The actor's expression is bare now. Eyes tired, cheekbones sharp, the fragile look of someone returning from a long distance. He says, "I forgot how my real voice sounded." The artist chuckles. Happens every night. Back in the rehearsal chamber, the lanterns are being extinguished one by one. A boy tiptoes through the room, blowing gently into each flame. Darkness rolls in. Not all at once, but in soft layers. Even the sound begins to recede. The shamisen has fallen quiet. The laughter has stopped. Just the faint creak of wood as someone folds a costume into a chest. And high above, in a small loft under the eaves, a girl no older than 16 copies kanji by moonlight. She is practicing, not for performance, but for passage. Her name is not known yet. It may never be. But she writes as if it matters, as if words might carry her through the layers of this place and into something of her own. The candle beside her flickers, then steadies. Outside, Yoshiwara's high walls shimmer faintly under the light of distant stars. But inside, the floating world continues. Not in noise, not in movement, but in the quiet persistence of ritual. A fan folded and unfolded. A line whispered and remembered. A face painted, then wiped clean. A name given, then never spoken again. Here, everything is temporary. Everything is illusion. And somehow, everything is true. Chapter 9. Red Threads and Soft Music. Segment 1 of 2. 5,000 characters. The evening deepens. Outside the walls of Yoshiwara, Edo grows quiet. The shops close. The fires dim. The carts roll slowly through the narrowing streets. But inside the pleasure district, light remains. It is the kind of light that glows rather than shines. Lanterns behind silk screens, candles flickering behind carved lattices. This is not the brightness of day. It is a warmer light, one made for reflection, not revelation. You sit now in a private room. The floor is soft beneath your knees. Tatami warmed by bodies that have come and gone for years. Before you sits a woman in layers of silk, her expression composed, her movements precise. Her name is not her name. It is the one she was given here, the one clients are allowed to use. Her face is powdered, but not heavily. Her hair is arranged with simple elegance, a few ornaments glinting in the candlelight. Her gaze does not linger on yours, but she watches you all the same, from beneath her lashes, from the corners of stillness between her gestures. She pours your tea. You watch her hands as she moves. They are practiced, but not cold. Every motion is deliberate. Pour, present, bow. She does not ask questions. She does not explain herself. Her role is not to be known, but to be present. Like music, like mist. You sip the tea. It's warm and bitter, laced with something floral. You're not sure what. Plum blossom, perhaps. Or maybe camellia. Soft music plays from the next room. A shamisen again. The 3-stringed instrument has a way of fading into the walls, its notes slipping into silence as easily as breath. The player is not visible. You hear only the sound, melancholy, controlled, distant. The courtesan speaks at last. Not of herself, but of a dream she once had. I was on a boat, drifting through fog. The oarsman had no face. The river had no shore. But there were lanterns in the sky, floating above us like eyes that did not blink. She doesn't explain it. She doesn't need to. The story hovers between you, like incense in the air. This is how connection works here. Not through confessions, not through touch, but through carefully constructed illusions, ones that feel more real than reality because they remade for exactly this moment. You respond with a story of your own. Perhaps true, perhaps not. She listens as if it matters, nodding once, gently, as though she's heard something like it before, and still finds it worth hearing again. In the corner of the room, a thin silk curtain stirs slightly. A breeze, or someone just passed behind it. You realize you're not alone in this building. You never were. On the other side of these walls, there are other rooms, other guests, other voices. But here, in this room, the world feels paused. You notice the threads on her robe, thin lines of red embroidered into the fabric. They curve and twist like rivers, weaving around the pale blue of the silk, never intersecting. You follow them with your eyes, trying to find their beginning. You don't. She follows your gaze. They say the red thread binds us to the people we're meant to meet, she says softly. You nod, though you've heard the story before. In this context, it feels different. The idea of unseen threads connecting strangers, quietly, permanently, invisibly. Perhaps that's what this whole world is. A room full of threads. None of them tangled, all of them leading somewhere you won't stay. The tea has cooled. You place the cup down. She adjusts her sleeves. Nothing more is said for a while, and in the distance, the music fades again. The courtesan rises slowly. Her movements, like before, are fluid, unbroken. She does not stand fully upright, nor does she rush. Every gesture feels like the next step in a quiet dance that only she knows. She walks to a small wooden chest in the corner of the room. From it, she retrieves a fan. Not the broad paper fans used for stage or ceremony, but a slender folding fan made of lacquered bamboo and soft white silk. The edges are stitched with gold thread. When she opens it, it sighs slightly, as if it remembers other hands, other rooms, other evenings like this. She holds it lightly and begins to wave it. Not at you, not toward herself, but simply through the air. Not to cool, but to shift the atmosphere. The flame of the candle flickers gently. The shadows on the wall dance, just a little. You realize that this gesture, the fan, the silence, the shifting shadows, is itself a message. But like most messages in this world, it is not meant to be decoded, only felt. She returns to her place across from you, her fan still open in her lap. When I was younger, she says after a time, I used to count the cherry blossoms when they fell. You look up. Her eyes are calm, focused not on the memory, but on your reaction to it. I thought, if I could count all of them, I'd know how long something would last. She smiles gently. But they fall too quickly. You always lose track. You nod. You don't speak. Words would be too heavy here. She picks up the shamisen resting nearby. Her fingers cradle it with easy familiarity. The strings are thin and worn, the neck smooth from years of use. She does not ask if you want to hear. She simply begins. The sound is soft and uneven at first, just a few plucked notes, delicate and uncertain. Then a rhythm emerges, a slow, meditative tempo, not a performance, a memory retold through music. Each note stretches into silence before the next arrives. Each silence feels necessary, like space between waves. You sit still. You watch her fingers move, her eyes half lowered, her body unmoving, except for the subtle shifts required to pull the sound from the strings. The music fills the room the way warm water fills a bowl, completely, gently, without spilling. She finishes. The final note hums in the air for a few seconds, then fades. No applause. No praise. That's not the point. You thank her with a bow. She nods in return. The fan is closed again, placed beside the shamisen. The cup is empty. The incense is burned low. The air is different now. Cooler, perhaps. Or maybe just more still. Your time is ending. You both know this. She stands and bows again, slightly deeper this time. You rise, matching her gesture. You do not ask when you can return. You do not ask her real name. These things are understood here. At the door, you pause. "Thank you," you say quietly. She smiles. Not the painted smile of her profession, but something smaller, more human. "There's nothing to thank," she replies. "You were here, that's all." Outside, the night has deepened. The alley glows with lanterns, and the air carries the faint scent of rain. You walk slowly through the streets of Yoshiwara, past other doors, other voices, other rooms lit with soft light. You wonder how many red threads float above these rooftops, and whether they're tied to anything at all. Chapter 10. The Gate of the Daimyo. Beyond the lantern glow of Yoshiwara, beyond the clatter of merchant stalls and the distant tolling of temple bells, stand the grand gates of the daimyo. Their walls are taller than a man can reach, lacquered in deep black, framed by beams so wide they seem like the trunks of fallen trees. The gates are closed, not locked but closed, and flanked by 2 guards in plain uniform, each standing perfectly still. Their presence is not for protection, but for punctuation. A reminder, this is not a place you enter lightly. Beyond these gates lies the private world of a daimyo, a provincial lord, a master of a domain far from Edo, but required by law and loyalty to reside here every second year under the shogunate's watchful eye. This system, Sankin Kotai, was meant to ensure obedience, and so the daimyo built their city residences not as homes, but as fortresses of elegance, symbols of their wealth and caution. The gate opens slowly. A single attendant bows deeply and gestures you inside. Within, all is still. A long stone path leads through a carefully raked garden. White gravel arranged in curves and lines that suggest rivers, waves, wind. It is not natural, and it is not meant to be. It is intentional peace, a crafted quiet. Moss climbs the base of a few stones. A single pine leans toward the east, shaped by decades of guided growth. Servants move through the compound like ink brushes on paper, silent, smooth, and only where needed. Each wears subdued colors, gray, brown, pale green. None speak unless addressed. Their task is not to be noticed. Inside the main house, tatami mats cover the floors in perfectly aligned rows. The scent of hinoki wood, clean and faintly citrus, lingers in the air. Incense burns somewhere, lavender or perhaps sandalwood. The daimyo sits in a study open to the garden. He is not old, though his robes suggest status beyond his years. A dark blue kimono, embroidered with chrysanthemums. His wakizashi rests beside him, not held, not drawn, but close. His posture is straight. His gaze is fixed not on any person, but on the calligraphy scroll hanging before him. It bears only 3 characters. Jingji no Li, the strength of stillness. A servant kneels to offer tea. The cup is taken without acknowledgement, the gesture so rehearsed it does not require thanks. The daimyo does not drink yet. He waits, not for a reason, just out of habit. He turns his eyes toward the table beside him. There, a single object rests, a sealed message, its paper thick, its ink fresh, its seal unmistakable. It bears the mark of the shogunate. He does not open it yet. Instead, he watches the garden, where a pair of koi ripple the surface of a small pond, and a crane-shaped stone rises from the water's edge. A boy sweeps fallen camellia petals from the veranda. One petal lands near the daimyo's foot. He does not move it. This is not idleness. It is preparation. Outside the room, a retainer kneels beside a pillar. He has not spoken in an hour. He will not be addressed unless summoned. But he remains alert. In the corridor, a young maid adjusts the position of a single-floor lamp. A few inches only, just enough to shift the shadow it casts on the bamboo mat. Nothing here is accidental. Not the silence, not the stillness, not the placement of the smallest leaf. The daimyo finally lifts the teacup, not quickly, not reverently, simply at the time that suits the moment. The porcelain is warm. The tea is pale and clear, steeped from leaves selected by a retainer earlier that morning. He drinks with no expression. The letter remains unopened beside him. The power of a daimyo is not in how quickly he acts, but in how long he can wait. Stillness is strength. The court in Edo watches for overreaction, for haste, for passion. The daimyo's greatest armor is his control, his mastery over his own impulses. A gust of wind lifts the edge of the scroll above the pond. The koi ripple again, scattering sunlight. He reaches slowly for the letter, breaks the seal with a soft tear, unfolds it once, reads it all without changing his expression. The shogun's words are measured. A shift in tax policy. A command to contribute laborers to a new canal system. A suggestion, though everyone knows what suggestion means when it comes from the central power. The daimyo's resources will be tested. He folds the letter again. No reaction. Not yet. Instead, he turns toward the inkstone at his side, a square of black ink, worn smooth. He lifts a bamboo brush and begins to write. Not a reply, just characters, deliberate and even. It is a poem. Though the pine leans east, still it grows straight through the frost, unmoved by the moon. When he finishes, he places the brush down and finally turns to his retainer. "Send word to the steward," he says. "That is all. No elaboration needed." The retainer bows and vanishes down the corridor. In the kitchen, the day's meals are being prepared, simple but elegant. Pickled plums, grilled river fish, steamed rice folded with sweet chestnut. A servant plucks a sprig of sancho leaf to place beside the fish. Presentation is as important as flavor. Each tray will be placed precisely so that when the daimyo dines, the meal appears effortless. A harmony of colors, textures, temperatures. Meanwhile, in a side room, a boy no older than 12 practices calligraphy. He is the daimyo's nephew, brought here to learn discipline, not affection. He writes the same character over and over, yi, gi, meaning justice or duty. His strokes are too fast, his lines too thick. The tutor kneels beside him, gently correcting the angle of his wrist. "Do not rush," she whispers. "The ink does not follow your hand, it follows your breath." In the evening, the daimyo will walk the garden alone, not with purpose, not for reflection, simply because the path is there, and because the act of walking quietly in circles reminds the mind of its own rhythm. The koi will be fed by hand. The lanterns will be lit just as the sun falls behind the western walls, and the letter from the shogun will be burned, not out of defiance, but because its message has already taken root. Its fire will be small, contained within a stone basin, just enough to carry the words upward into smoke. The gate will remain closed. The servants will sweep once more before retiring, and in the daimyo's study, a single candle will continue to burn, its flame perfectly still. Chapter 11. Moonlight over the rock garden. It is the 15th night of the 8th lunar month, Tsukimi, the festival of the harvest moon. All across Edo, people gather in gardens and verandas to watch the full moon rise. Paper lanterns hang from bamboo poles. Children chase shadows with wooden clappers. Temple bells sound farther apart tonight, each chime softer than the last. But within the daimyo's estate, everything is slower. The house is quieter than usual, even by its own standards. The preparations have been made, not loudly, but carefully. Tatami mats have been swept and brushed. The wooden floors wiped to a soft polish. Candles positioned so their light does not compete with the moon. The moon is the guest of honor. Everything else must wait in silence. The daimyo steps out onto the veranda, his robe thick with embroidered cranes and pale plum blossoms. He is followed by a few close retainers, each one carefully chosen, each one knowing exactly how far behind to walk. Ahead of them is the rock garden. The stones sit as they have for years, some upright, others flat, placed in deliberate asymmetry. The raked gravel winds around them in careful patterns, representing water, wind, stillness. The garden is not designed to be walked in. It is designed to be seen. Under moonlight, its layers reveal themselves slowly. Low cushions are placed at the edge of the veranda. The daimyo takes his seat without a word. The others follow, folding their legs, hands in lap, heads lowered slightly, not from submission, but from respect. To speak now would be to interrupt the arrival of the moon. A tray is brought out, small ceramic cups, each filled with chilled sake, a porcelain bowl of sweet beans, thin slices of pear, pickled ginger, pale and translucent as rice paper. None of it is meant to fill the stomach. It is for taste, not hunger. The moon appears gradually, not with drama, but with inevitability. It clears the high garden walls, washing the rocks in silver. The shadows of the pine trees shift gently across the gravel, creating new shapes not designed by human hand. Someone inhales. Not loudly, just audibly enough to feel like a sigh. One of the daimyo's companions, a man older than the rest, recites a haiku. Over silent stones, the moon pauses in the sky, then slowly moves on. No response is needed. The words drift into the air and dissolve. This is moon viewing, but it is also memory viewing, breath viewing, stillness viewing. The garden becomes a kind of stage, and the moon its only performer. Inside the house, the servants wait silently. They do not eat. They do not clean. They wait. Until the daimyo finishes watching the moon, time is suspended. A child coughs softly from the servant quarters. The sound is not loud, but it carries. The daimyo's eyes narrow slightly. He does not speak, but a retainer rises and steps inside. A few quiet words are exchanged. The child is removed, not punished, not scolded, but distanced. The quiet must hold. Outside, the breeze shifts, brushing against the long sleeves of the men seated in the moonlight. No one adjusts their clothing. Stillness is a form of strength. Another poem is spoken, this one shorter. The moon on water. I reached to hold it. Only ripples in the pond. A single crane calls somewhere in the distance. Perhaps from the riverbank. Perhaps only in the imagination. No one comments on it. The sake cups are refilled once, not twice. Too much drinking would disturb the balance of the evening. The daimyo lifts his head, eyes reflecting the full disk of the moon. He remains this way for a long time, not speaking, not nodding, simply allowing the moment to exist. And then, just as quietly, he stands. The others follow. The moon remains, but the ceremony is over. The daimyo steps back into the house, and the doors to the veranda are closed. Not with force, but with a practiced gliding motion that scarcely disturbs the air. The thin shoji screens muffle the moonlight, softening it to a glow that spills gently onto the polished wooden floor. The servants move again, quietly, efficiently, almost invisibly. The trays are removed. The cushions are gathered and shaken free of invisible dust. The rock garden outside remains untouched. It will not be raked again until morning. The patterns are allowed to rest as they are, formed under the moon's eye, not a gardener's hand. In a smaller chamber just beyond the hall, the daimyo seats himself once more. The incense burner is lit anew, faint trails of smoke rising in coils that fade as soon as they appear. A letter lies unfolded before him, weighed at each corner by smooth river stones. It is not official correspondence. It is a personal message, handwritten, unsealed. The calligraphy is uneven, but the meaning is clear. It is from his eldest son, far away in their provincial domain. The boy speaks of the harvest. of repairs to the family shrine, of a villager whose name the daimyo does not recognize. There is a note of respect, but also of distance, the kind that grows between a father and a son raised apart by duty. The boy will one day sit where his father sits now, but not yet, not soon. The daimyo sets the letter aside. He does not smile nor frown. Instead, he reaches for a small inkstone and brush and begins to write. Not a reply, but a poem. The moon casts no shadow upon the rock that does not already know night. He does not sign it. Instead, he folds it and places it into the drawer of a small wooden chest, a drawer that holds many such poems, most never sent. Down the hall, another kind of silence settles. A young page boy, barely 12, kneels in a storage alcove, adjusting the alignment of scrolls within their cases. He is careful with each one, touching only the outer cords, never the paper itself. He hums a tune beneath his breath, something his mother used to sing when folding laundry in the morning. No one hears him, or if they do not correct him. Elsewhere, the women of the household, maids, cooks, seamstresses, begin their own slow wind down. Some kneel together to patch robes by candlelight, the rhythmic sound of the needle slipping through cloth soothing in its repetition. One girl stifles a yawn. Another whispers something small, and they all smile for just a moment before returning to the fabric. In the guardhouse near the outer wall, a man sits sharpening a spear. The stone slides across the blade, again and again, as soft as rain on stone. His partner sips weak tea, watching the moon rise higher through a gap in the gate. No words are exchanged. Back in the main house, the daimyo stands. He removes his outer robe, folds it once, and places it in the cedar drawer beneath the window. He extinguishes the incense burner with a quick gesture of his sleeve, snuffing the smoke without disturbing the coals. Before stepping behind the folding screen to rest, he glances once more at the garden, now only visible as soft shadows beyond the shoji. The rocks are still there. The gravel lines are still curved. The moon still high. Everything is in its place. Yet something always shifts in these quiet hours. Not loudly, not obviously, but slowly, gently, just enough that tomorrow will not be exactly the same. The candle is extinguished. The room falls dark. Outside, the moon begins its slow descent behind the far hills, casting its last silver light on the rooftops of Edo. And in the silence that remains, the house rests. Even a daimyo must sleep. Chapter 12. The Garden Wall. Morning arrives slowly in the daimyo's estate. There is no sudden call, no ringing bell, no burst of movement. The day unfolds the way parchment unrolls, gently, smoothly, without force. The first light does not spill, but seeps, filtered through paper screens and sliding doors, softened by mist rising from the stone garden paths. The air is cool, damp from the dew that gathers before dawn. Somewhere beyond the inner courtyards, a single bird chirps, then falls quiet again. The garden wall catches the first rays of sunlight. It is made of stone and packed clay, smoothed over with years of careful repairs. Moss has begun to climb its base in places, softening the line between earth and man-made boundary. The wall is tall, but not imposing. Its strength lies not in its height, but in its stillness. A servant girl kneels by the edge of the wall, sweeping fallen leaves with a slender broom made of tied twigs. She works slowly, without urgency. Each sweep gathers a few red and gold maple leaves now brittle from the cold. She gathers them into a basket beside her, careful not to crush them. Even discarded things are treated with attention here. Inside the main house, the day's first movement begins. Shoji doors slide open. Cushions are reset. Water is heated for tea, not boiled quickly, but allowed to reach temperature in a heavy black pot suspended above glowing coals. The scent of charred cedar and iron fills the kitchen air. The head steward, an elderly man with sleeves folded carefully at his wrists, walks the hall with quiet steps. He nods to each servant, inspects the angles of the hanging scrolls, adjusts the height of a single lantern by the entry. He says little. His presence is the message. Breakfast is prepared. Not grand, not excessive. A tray of white rice, a single salted fish, a portion of pickled plum, a bowl of miso with wakame, a square of roasted seaweed folded like a letter. These are not luxuries. These are necessities, offered respectfully. The daimyo enters the room in silence. He is already dressed, his robe plain this morning, a sign that no visitors are expected. His face is unreadable, but not stern. It is the face of someone who has not yet spoken today. He takes his seat. The servants bow, and the tray is set before him. No one watches him eat. They bow again and retreat to the edges of the room, kneeling with heads low. He eats slowly, not because he is savoring the food, but because each bite marks the beginning of routine. There is comfort in predictability. Somewhere nearby, a messenger arrives. His steps are light, but the echo of his sandals carries across the stone floor. He waits outside the inner gate, kneeling on the cold stones. A page informs the steward, who in turn approaches the daimyo. "There is a letter, my lord. It has come from the shogunate." The daimyo does not look up. He places a piece of roasted seaweed on his rice, chews once. Then he nods. The steward leaves. The messenger is brought inside, shown to a side chamber. He will wait as long as necessary. It may be an hour, it may be 3. Time in the estate moves differently. Outside, beyond the garden wall, a breeze stirs. The trees along the boundary rustle softly. 2 sparrows flit across the top of the stonework, vanishing behind a branch heavy with moisture. Beyond the wall, the city begins to stir. Carts roll past. Street vendors call out in voices not yet warmed by the sun. But inside the estate, that world feels far away. Here, the garden wall holds more than space. It holds silence. It holds distance. It separates the world of ritual from the world of noise. A servant girl stops her sweeping and gazes upward. A single leaf falls, spiraling down in slow circles. It lands gently in the basket. She bows to it without thinking. The shogunate has made a request. Not an order, at least not in name, but the language is formal and weighted. A new road is to be constructed through the eastern edges of the daimyo's province. For commerce, they say. For stability. But everyone knows what it means. It is a test. The letter ends, as they always do, with a line of courtesy. Your cooperation, as always, is expected with honor. The daimyo folds the paper in half, then again. He does not sigh. He does not speak. Outside, the morning continues. The house breathes in cycles. Doors open and close on quiet tracks. Water is fetched. Tatami mats are aired in the sun. But beneath this surface movement, a shift is underway. Small, deliberate, almost invisible. The steward returns, waiting silently until acknowledged. The daimyo hands him the folded letter. "Prepare the response," he says. There is no discussion. The steward bows and leaves, already forming the proper phrases in his mind. Obedient, loyal, and without question. In the north wing, a group of scribes begin preparing documents. One dips his brush into fresh ink and draws the opening line, thick, bold, respectful. Another servant enters the storage house to inventory timber. The request for lumber is no small matter. It will take weeks of coordination. Men will be summoned from villages. Rice rations must be calculated. Carts readied, routes chosen, no mistakes. And yet the house remains calm. Because this is how power moves, not in bursts, but in ripples. The daimyo walks alone along the inner corridor. His steps are soft, his face unreadable. He pauses by a window overlooking the garden wall. From here, he can see the top of the pine trees swaying gently. The moss at the wall's base glistens with morning dew. A lone frog, hidden in the damp stones, croaks once, then falls silent. He stays a moment longer, then continues on. In the far courtyard, the young page boy is practicing his bow. A wooden sword rests at his side, untouched. His knees ache, but he holds his posture. His tutor observes from a distance, saying nothing. The boy shifts slightly. A leaf lands on his sleeve. He doesn't brush it off. The daimyo stops to watch. He says nothing, but the boy, sensing presence, bows again, deeper this time. Back inside, in the preparation room, two servants unroll a travel map. A red line is drawn across it, a route that will cut through villages, rivers, and wooded slopes. A third servant marks each checkpoint with tiny ink dots. Each mark is a life affected. Each line, a task assigned. Each road built, a test of loyalty. By midday, the house has resumed its usual rhythm. No shouts, no scurrying. The walls hold the weight of their decisions with grace. In the tea room, the brazier is lit once more. Steam rises in delicate whirls. A new guest will arrive soon, a poet from Kyoto, known for his verses about wind and snowfall. The room is prepared not just with cushions, but with questions left unspoken. And all the while, the garden wall remains, quiet, unmoving, its surface shaded by the arch of pine, its stones warming slowly under the turning sun. The leaf swept earlier by the servant girl has not returned, but more will fall, always. Here is the conclusion of the story, a gentle farewell to Edo. And now, as the final shoji screen closes and the lanterns dim, we come to the end of our journey through Edo, Japan. You have traveled far, not in distance, but in time. Not through grand battles or sweeping changes, but through the ordinary rhythm of an age defined by stillness, structure, and silence. A time where life moved with the seasons, and where every step, every bow, every word carried the weight of centuries of order. It began with dawn. In a humble home, beneath a roof of straw, you awoke before the rooster crowed. There was rice gruel simmering in a clay pot, sandals waiting at the threshold, and mist still heavy on the mountain path. You walked to the fields, not for glory, not for wealth, but because it was your place in the world. You weaved yourself into the quiet labor that sustained a village, pulling weeds by the roadside, bowing to samurai who would never return the gesture. You returned home in the dark, counting coins beside the fire, whispering of taxes and salt fish and what little rice could be spared. The silence of the house was not peaceful. It was full of calculation, of quiet burdens passed from hand to hand, mouth to mouth. Yet, in the stillness, there was also endurance and care. Then, far from your modest world, a sword was drawn in silence, not on the battlefield, but in a room of polished floorboards and paper walls where words were sharper than steel. Lord Asano's blade, drawn in anger, sliced not only through silk, but through the illusion of control. In that moment, everything changed. His seppuku was not a spectacle. It was a ritual, and his death became the spark for a silence that endured through 2 long winters. The 47 ronin, once his sworn men, became shadows. A carpenter, a drunk, a tea-house owner. They waited, not out of revenge, but out of loyalty. A slow, meditative kind of waiting that snowed over the city without notice. And then, one winter night, they moved. Through frozen streets and splintering gates they marched to Kira's house, not with fury, but with purpose. No cruelty, no excess, only what duty required. They brought justice to a quiet grave and left their own fates there beside it, their names etched not in glory, but in stone. At Sengakuji, they remained still, and yet, even amid that solemnity, you were shown another side of Edo, a softer place, a floating world. You wandered into Yoshiwara, where candles flickered behind red paper, and where names were not names and faces were painted with meaning. There, Time slowed again. Tea was poured without question. Fans unfolded like questions never asked. Geisha spoke in poems. Courtesans smiled with perfect detachment. It was not love. It was not illusion. It was something in between, a performance of care, rehearsed until it felt real. Behind the screens, kabuki actors trembled beneath their white-painted masks. Shamisen players plucked forgotten stories into the air, and women wrote poems that would never be read, folding them neatly beside cups that had long gone cold. This world, like so many in Edo, was not about truth in the Western sense. It was about presence, precision, the moment. And beyond the wall of that floating world, in the homes of the powerful, another silence ruled. You stood at the gate of a daimyo's estate, where gravel was raked like water, and koi moved through ponds without causing ripples. The daimyo did not speak often, but when he did, it was heard. His home was made of shadows and stillness. His letters, like swords, were rarely drawn but always seen. His life was lived as if the entire house were listening. There, in that garden, the moon was viewed as if it might vanish if you blinked. Haiku were spoken like prayers. Children were removed for coughing. The moonlight touched each stone with permission. You saw how power flowed not in declarations, but in how long a man could remain unmoved. And in the final moments, as morning returned again, the house stirred with routine. The servant swept leaves from the moss-lined wall. The letter arrived from the shogunate. No panic followed, just readiness. Because in Edo, even change had its script. And now, as you rest here at the end, you are part of that quiet rhythm. The leaves still fall. The koi still swim. The sandals are still placed at the door. And everything continues, gently, when silence becomes memory. Let us stay here just a little longer, not in the fields, not in the court, not in the pleasure quarters or the stone-lined gardens, but in the hush that follows. Because now, as your breath slows and your mind begins to drift, Edo itself becomes memory. A memory not just of events, but of feelings, textures, rituals, shadows, the soft echo of wooden sandals on a gravel path, the steam rising from a chipped teacup, the weight of coins unrolled onto a floor that still smells faintly of smoke. You have lived a dozen lives tonight, each one small, each one significant. You were a farmer, bending over water-laced fields with the ache of constancy in your bones. You did not speak unless needed. You counted weeds, not hours. You bowed to power and said nothing when it did not bow back. You were a husband, a father, a quiet figure by the hearth, watching firelight flicker across your wife's tired hands and your children's dreaming faces. You swallowed disappointment like salted plum, sour but necessary. You were a samurai without a master, wandering not for battle, but for honor. You disguised yourself in plainness, in shame, in patience, and when the moment came, you reclaimed your purpose not with noise, but with a single, final gesture beneath falling snow. You were also a guest in the floating world, where emotions danced behind painted fans and laughter was practiced like song. You sat in silence as a courtesan told you a story that made no sense and yet stayed with you like scent on your sleeves. You forgot your name, your home, even time, and for a moment, that forgetting was a kind of peace. And beyond all that, you were a silent observer in the chambers of power, where decisions rippled through a nation, not with shouts, but with ink. You watched a daimyo write poems he would never send, walk gardens he would never change, and burn letters not from rebellion, but from understanding. These lives, these quiet, specific, ordinary moments, are the heart of Edo. And in remembering them, in walking among them so softly, you have joined something older than sleep, something deeper than history. You have listened, not to what people shouted, but to what they endured. You have watched, not the turning points but the pauses between them. And now, you rest, not just because you are tired, but because the story has taught you how. The people of Edo did not always live happily. They did not always live freely, but they lived, present, attentive, respectful of place and season. They lived knowing that their every step might be seen by someone behind a paper wall, that their every word might echo beyond the room it was spoken in, that even the way they folded a cloth could speak of character. And in their discipline, there was beauty. In their waiting, there was strength. In their stillness, there was life. So let that stillness hold you now. Let the field hush. Let the fan close. Let the candle flicker and fade. You do not need to remember every name, every poem, every act of loyalty or loss. You only need to remember the quiet, the steady rhythm of a world that trusted the moon to rise, the season to turn, and the stone to remain where it was placed. Let that world stay with you, just behind your eyes, just beneath your breath, as you drift into rest. The garden wall is still there. The incense has burned down to ash, and everything is as it should be. Good night. Final words from the drowsy historian. Before the lantern fades and the screen darkens, I'd love to hear from you. What part of this journey through Edo stayed with you the most? Was it the silent strength of the Ronin, the stillness of the rock garden, or the way the floating world drifted past like a dream? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to read your thoughts, even if it's just one quiet word. And if this story helped you drift off, feel a little calmer, or simply imagine a world long gone, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, The Drowsy Historian. There are many more nights, many more forgotten corners of history waiting to be explored. Always slow, always soft, always just right for sleep. Until next time, rest well.